I've lived in the shadow of Detroit long enough to know that a city isn't built on a PR campaign or a shiny new stadium. It's built on the backs of people who show up when the weather is gray and the shift is long. When I rebranded this podcast and the blog with the new slogan, No Glitz, Just the Work, it wasn't just because it looked good on a banner. It's because after 14 years of writing and nearly 1,000 days of this specific rebuild, I've realized that the glitz is a lie. The growth, the real tectonic plate shifting kind of growth, happened on the Tuesday nights when I had nothing left to give, but I gave it anyway. It's a strange thing to look back on. I've been shouting into the digital void for 14 years now. For a long time, it was just blogging. But something changed about 3.5 years ago. The deep dive became more than a metaphor. I stopped just documenting my life and I started interrogating it. And as I look over my shoulder today, standing at mile 26 of this 26.2 mile marathon, this 1,000 day consecutive streak, I can finally see the hurdles I've cleared in the rear view. They don't look like giant obstacles anymore. They look like landmarks. They look like proof. Episode 10, No Glitz, Just the Work, begins now. I spent a lot of time on this podcast and on the blog talking about this 1,000 day streak that I've been on. But the truth is, this blog library of mine goes back much further. I actually started this blog shortly after my separation all the way back in 2012. If you look at those early years, you see a man trying to find his footing. But for a long time, I was just documenting. I was recording the weather of my life. It took 11 years, some lean years, and there were a couple of false starts along the way, to realize that documenting just wasn't enough. Somewhere in this current 1,000 day stretch, the soul searching turned into a self-induced interrogation. I stopped asking what happened today, and I started asking, why did I let that happen? How do I feel about that happening? That is the difference between a diary and a rebuild. One tracks time, the other tracks change. If I'm being honest with you, and that's what this 1,000 day journey has been all about, the work didn't actually start 980 days ago. It started 6 years ago, in the aftermath of a breakup that served as my point of no return. At the time, I thought the hurdle was just getting over the person, but I was wrong. The hurdle was coming to terms with the fact that I had become a cog in the machine. After my divorce, I was so desperate to fulfill the role of provider, the husband, the dad, the lover, the protector, that I had completely erased the man underneath. I had forgotten how to be happy standing on my own 2 feet. I realized that after my marriage ended, I was so determined to make the next thing work that I became more invested in the success of the relationship than I was in the actual person I was with. That is a massive mind job to dissect. It's a level of denial that's hard to admit to, but that's where the no glitz mantra really lives. It lives in the deep, dark truths that we finally stop hiding from ourselves. That breakup was the moment that I realized that being part of the package wasn't enough if I didn't even know what was in the package anymore. It's taken 6 years and nearly 1,000 days of documented daily reflection, but I finally cleared the hurdle. I stopped settling for breadcrumbs and I started demanding the 100%. Not because I'm selfish, but because I finally remembered who I am. If I'm being totally honest with myself, I'm not sure exactly when the 100% policy, or option C, became my foundations. There wasn't a ribbon cutting ceremony or anything like that. Maybe I just got old. Maybe I just ran out of patience. Maybe I got bored with the breadcrumb diet of modern relationships. But one day I woke up and I realized I wasn't just saying I wouldn't settle anymore. I was actually living it. I started practicing that line that Guinan says to Wesley Crusher on Star Trek The Next Generation when she tells him that there are times in life where you have to be selfish. There are those moments where you have to think about yourself. That is option C. It's not a me first attitude or some selfish ego trip. It's self-preservation. It's the realization that I can't pour from an empty cup, and I can't make anyone else happy if I'm still a cog in somebody else's machine. One day I just looked in the mirror and I realized I was finally listening to my own instincts. I finally chose the guy looking back at me. There's a bit of Holden Caulfield in me. In The Catcher in the Rye, Holden spent his time railing against the phonies, the people who are all surface and no soul. You know, looking back, when I was younger, I actually kind of looked like Holden Caulfield. I had that same buzz cut that he describes himself having in the book. In fact, one of my oldest friends in this life had told me one time when we were in high school, he said, "Rob, you are Holden Caulfield." And if I'm honest, I feel the same exhaustion that he feels when I look at social media today. It's all plasticity. It's all, ooh, this is my awesome meal I had tonight, or this is my awesome vacation, or look at my boat, or look at my car. It's bullshit. It's everybody putting their best foot forward, filtering their lives until reality is unrecognizable. I got a little secret for everybody. Life is fucking hard, okay? In the entire history of human civilization, Mother Nature and Father Time are undefeated. None of us get out of this thing alive. And it's not always pretty. We have some dark times, but those dark days are what make the good days worth living for, and they make those good days that much sweeter. That is why no glitz is so vital to me. I don't want to give you the polished version of my life. I'd rather give you the faults, the warts, and the Tuesday nights where I'm just barely hanging on. Because the work isn't just about getting better. It's about being real enough to admit where you've been. If I'm going to rebuild a life, I want to build it on something solid and not a digital illusion. As of this episode going live, I'm only 18 days away from that 1,000 day milestone. But here's the thing. Like so many other areas of my life, I realize I'm something of a late bloomer. I'm standing at mile 26 of this 26.2 mile marathon, and instead of looking for the exit, I feel like I'm finally finding my stride. I feel like I'm just getting started. I have no intention of ending this streak on day 1001. Reaching the milestone isn't the end of the work. It's just a proof that the work is possible. We've cleared the hurdles, we've interrogated the past, and we've stopped settling for breadcrumbs. Now, we just keep moving forward, one day at a time. No glitz, just the work. This episode of Rebuilding Rob, the podcast, was produced, edited, written, and hosted by yours truly, your favorite blogger, a guy named Rob. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I'm well aware that, like me, you have a ton of podcast listening options, so I'm honored that you decided to take a little bit of time out of your day to spend here with me. Rebuilding Rob, the podcast, is available wherever you find your favorite podcast. Of course, you probably figured that part out already, or else you wouldn't be listening to me now. If you're interested in more insight into this perfectly ordinary, non-gun-owning white guy, feel free to check out my blog at rebuildingrob.com. So until then, this is Rob, reminding you to be audacious, be bold, be brave, be strong enough to be gentle, and remember, the rebuild never ends. Bye, everybody!